A warm welcome to you all. I'm Linda Yu, and it is my pleasure to moderate this Education Above All event in association with the Asian Development Bank and the Qatar Fund for Development. Every year, the heads of state gather at the UN General Assembly to discuss, review, and decide on critical issues that are affecting the world. This year's event, more than previous years, is critically important. COVID-19 has derailed progress towards achieving the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. With many countries running deficits to repair their own economies, there are serious concerns that sufficient education financing and investment will not reach the most marginalized and vulnerable in our global society. In response to this crisis, the Education Above All EAA Foundation, a global education foundation established in 2012 by Her Highness Sheikha Moza bint Nasser, is holding the session at UNGA 2021 to share the experiences of its Educate a Child program, the EAC, and those of its global partners in supporting SDG 4.1 and out-of-school children. This UNGA side session will highlight and focus on the range of approaches that EAA and its partners have employed to promote financing partnerships. We will cover the innovative partnership financing models that promote aligned, harmonized, and results-oriented education investments to achieve SDG 4.1 by 2030. In short, it will require harmonized and aligned financing built upon solid partnerships. So we have a fantastic lineup of speakers. We'll be hearing from representatives from a range of multi-sector organizations who will speak to the different financing mechanisms developed and deployed globally, including examples from EAC projects to promote quality education for the hardest to reach out-of-school children. So we will first have opening remarks by Her Excellency Sheikha Aliya bint Ahmed Al Thani, Permanent Representative of Qatar to the United Nations.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very much delighted, of course, to take part in this virtual high-level panel organized by Education Above All Foundation and their partners, aiming at discussing partnerships, financing, and innovative models for education. The state of Qatar is deeply committed to ensuring that all girls and boys complete free, equitable, and quality primary and secondary education, including those living in countries affected by humanitarian crisis. Education is one of the top priorities of the state of Qatar's development policy. We believe that without investment in quality education, progress on all other SDGs will not advance. Unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic continues to pose a major threat to children's access to quality education. Education is key to building back better a post-COVID-19 world. We need new global commitments by both governments and international community to protect and transform education. In this, it is critical that we close the digital gap. Private sector contribution is extremely important in this regard. In 2020, Qatar Fund for Development supported increased access to learning for out-of-school children worldwide. Close to $122 million were provided for education needs worldwide. Education Above All Foundation aims to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Their establishing mandate is to influence the enrollment and retention of at least 10 million children who are out of primary education. Since its inception, of course, Education Above All Foundation has worked as well and targeted hard to reach marginalized children, in particular children in poverty, those who face social and cultural barriers to education. and those in crisis and conflict-affected environments. By working through partnerships and emphasizing innovative scale and sustainability, EAC, and of course in that I mean the Educated Child Initiative, contributes to enabling every child to fulfill her and his right to quality education. Educated Child Initiative have implemented up to date 74 projects in 51 countries. To date, Educated Child actual enrollment surpass more than 9.2 million out-of-school children, and the organization has committed in place to reach more than 12 million children out of school. One point I wanted to emphasize as well, our interest to focus on the needs of least developed countries and fragile countries should be prioritized. To mention, of course, that the state of Qatar will host the 5th United Nations Conference on Least Developed Countries that will take place between the 23rd and the 27th of January 2022. We hope that the Doha Program of Action that will be adopted at the conference will harness the full potential of education and new technologies for the least developed countries. I will stop here, and I'm really glad that this event is taking place during high-level week of the 76th session of the General Assembly to set the tone on the need to focus more and more on building more partnerships to advocate for education and the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you again for education, above all, for prioritizing this issue.
Thank you very much to Your Excellency for those wonderful opening remarks. And now, let's enjoy a video presentation before we hear from our keynote speakers.
World full of choices, not everyone will thrive. In a world full of choices, not everyone can fly. We have been forgotten, lost without a home, so unsure of the future. What will become of us? It's not your fault, there's no one to blame. Storms can be cold, but the sun will shine again.
That was a wonderful video to set a scene for us. And now it's time to hear from the first of our keynote speakers, Ms. Kelly T. Clements, Deputy High Commissioner, UNHCR. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Linda, and greetings to all. I'm really delighted to be part of this distinguished event, and warm thanks to the Education Above All Foundation for organizing it. Education Above All's continued support and commitment to our long-standing partnership has made really a critical difference in advancing education for refugee and other displaced children. Today, I want to reflect on how multilateral agencies like the UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, can be critical drivers in leveraging and aligning global financing, both public and private, towards the education of refugee and displaced children. Let me start first by giving a quick overview of the increasing global levels of displacement and the stark education realities of those children, along with some examples of UNHCR's interventions to support their access to education and continued learning. In 2020, more than 82 million people were forcibly displaced worldwide by conflict, by violence, by persecution. That's equivalent to more than 1 out of every 100 people on Earth. And among those, nearly half are children, 1 million of whom were born into displacement within the last 2 years alone. With new and increasingly complex crises in Ethiopia, the Sahel region, and more recently in Afghanistan, displacement numbers are likely to continue to rise, overwhelming an already overstretched international response and limited funding. Escalating global displacement is now coupled with the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, which has had a devastating impact on many around the world, but most especially the education, the health, livelihoods, and protection of those forced to flee. These challenges can only be met by scaling up deliberate and coordinated collective action. Refugees leave behind more than their home when they flee. Among other things, refugee children must also abandon their schools and their studies. And with the average length of displacement lasting a generation, every year of disruption in education can snowball, with children falling further and further behind. According to our latest education report, released just a few weeks ago, the situation of education for refugee children looks especially grim. With the backdrop of the pandemic, we have seen persistent disruptions to schooling, which have exacerbated disparities for refugee children seeking to access quality learning. As of 2020, nearly half of all refugee children are estimated to be out of school. At every level of education, refugee enrollment is lower than their non-refugee peers. We have already seen some initial indications of the devastating impact of the pandemic, with refugee children estimated to have missed on average 142 days of school and having increased exposure to protection risks such as early marriage, teenage pregnancy, and child labor. Without urgent and concrete measures to reach children in refugee and crisis settings, progress towards achieving SDG4 will remain severely hampered. This should be a concern for all of us. Despite the challenging situation for refugee children and youth, we have observed incredible resilience and locally inspired solutions. Refugee teachers have stepped up during periods of school closure to support remote learning, for example, by hosting on-air lessons on local and community radio stations. Parents, who often lack resources themselves, have gone to extreme lengths to ensure that their children have ongoing access to education. UNHCR has remained strongly committed to driving greater advocacy, action, and creativity towards solutions for meeting the education needs of refugee children. Calls for cooperation and solidarity with refugees and their affected host communities is built on the very foundation with the 1951 Convention related to the status of refugees, and it's reaffirmed in the Global Compact on Refugees adopted in 2018. This means, in part, mobilizing and widening international support through pledges and contributions. This is why partnerships, such as the long-standing one between the UN Refugee Agency and Educate a Child, are so important. Educate a Child is an excellent illustration of how, through strategic and innovative co-financing models, we can meaningfully address persistent education challenges to ensure that refugee children, especially those that are out of school, are given a chance to learn. Since 2012, the partnership with Educate a Child has helped over 1.2 million out-of-school displaced children gain access to primary school. A new expanded phase of this partnership is currently being implemented with the aim of enrolling a further 364,800 children in primary school programs by the end of 2022. This phase has come at an opportune time when we're planning a recovery from the global pandemic, and that includes education. Interventions supported under the joint program have been instrumental in ensuring the continuity of learning and teaching during the pandemic, those school closures, and in supporting reopening efforts. The multi-year programming model adopted in the Educated Child program has not only enabled UNHCR to ensure the continuity of education activities in those countries where it is implemented, but it's also situated education within a wider protection and solutions framework as guided by the Global Compact on Refugees. At the same time, it has helped UNHCR mobilize and leverage additional resources, attracting new donors and partners to join forces and provide additional support in helping to expand access to quality education, strengthening educational systems, and positively impacting both refugees and host communities alike. I am pleased to see some of the partners represented at this event today. For example, together with Education Cannot Wait, our joint advocacy, planning, and coordination has facilitated increased support for children's education. One of our ongoing collaborations includes the Humanitarian Education Accelerator to support promising innovations to scale up practices in education. I also want to highlight the efforts of the World Bank to scale up support not only through its dedicated window supporting host communities and refugees, but additionally through the Global Concessional Financing Facility that provides concessional financing to middle-income countries hosting large numbers of refugees. This represents a strong, innovative financing mechanism with huge dividends for both refugees and host communities. UNHCR and World Bank will generate the necessary evidence to target this support. The Global Partnership for Education commitment to support education in countries experiencing emergencies will improve education financing and lead towards the practical fulfillment of the Global Compact on Refugees. With many refugee hosting countries, including refugees in their national education systems, support from the Global Partnership will remain vital. These are just a few examples of the breadth of partnerships and differing financing modalities that complement public financing, which remains an important and predictable resource and reinforces international solidarity in making the Global Compact on Refugees a reality. However, the totality of funds we received is not enough to meet the current and growing needs. Together, we need to continue to explore new partnerships and financing mechanisms that resource both humanitarian and development needs. We need to find ways to address barriers faced by all displaced children who remain out of school. Their future is too important to fail. Given the growing displacement situation, its protracted nature, and resourcing shortfalls, we must continue to work together to mobilize adequate and sustainable resources to ensure that all children, including refugees, are provided with the opportunity to learn, to grow, and ultimately contribute to their communities through a quality education. Thank you for your support. Together, we can make a difference.
Thank you very much to Kelly. What a wonderful message. By working together, and that is one of the two key messages from this session, partnerships and co-financing, you can have a much broader impact. And this will always have been important, but especially, as you point out, in the post-pandemic world, a lot of the vulnerable communities are even more vulnerable, and there's a much greater need to continue to support out-of-school children. So a terrific keynote to kick us off. And now our next keynote, if I can introduce Dr. Bamban Susantono, Vice President for Knowledge Management and Sustainable Development at the Asian Development Bank.
Thank you very much, Dr. Linda. Honorables, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, a very good day to all of you. On behalf of the Asian Development Bank, we are delighted to co-organize these panels and offer our support and commitment to learning for all. The pandemic has disproportionately deepened our learning crisis and the inequality felt by the most vulnerable school-age children. In response, there is a global consensus that we must mobilize more resources for education and prioritize spending on foundational learning, especially of the most affected children. At ADB, we are doubling our efforts to increase annual lending to support the education sector. We are looking at increasing education lending up to $2 billion into 2024. ADB and Qatar's Education Above All Foundations, or EAA, signed a framework partnership agreement in July 2020 to support out-of-school children in ADB's developing member countries. Our partnership is a prime example of how collaboration works. We blend ADB loans and EAA grants and combine our expertise to make our support attractive to our developing member countries. This is a win-win for all with the high economic returns, but most importantly, it benefits those that need it the most. The EAA Foundation is, in fact, the very first private foundations to co-finance ADB results-based financing program in education. It means that the partnership is playing an important role in promoting the use of this financing modality in the education sector of our developing member countries. Let me say a few words about how result-based financing helps ADB support become more efficient, more effective, and more impactful. The first pioneered results-based lending in education in 2013. This new approach moved away from measuring the program's input, but instead focused on assessing their outputs and outcomes. The main strength of this approach is that it enhances the capacity and of ownership of the government institutions that are involved in achieving the agreed development results. It also reduced transaction costs for our developing member countries. Because of the higher program efficiency and effectiveness, result-based financing modality has been attracting support both from governments and partners like EAA. Good progress is being made in preparing and launching the two results-based lending programs that we are co-financing with EAA in Bangladesh and Pakistan. In Bangladesh, we have the supporting fourth primary education development program. The objective is to provide quality education to all children from pre-primary to grade 5 by creating an efficient, inclusive, and equitable education system. ADB co-finances $500 million with additional $900 million coming from the European Union, the World Bank, Japan, JICA, and UNICEF. EAA is also contributing $12.4 million, but the value of the foundation's support to this program goes much beyond this number. More importantly, the EAA's participation has helped this program amplify the focus on out-of-school children. When completed, the program will have assisted around 650,000 out-of-school children between the age of 8 and 14 obtain primary educations. The second result-based lending program is the Pakistan Integrated Social Protection Development Program. This $600 million program is at an advanced stage of preparations. EAA's contribution will support one of the program's key goals of providing 960,000 out-of-school children aged 7 to 16 years with primary educations, especially the poor and those affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. Let me reiterate that these two programs are good examples of how strong partnerships are needed to address the learning crisis while targeting the most vulnerable groups. To turn the crisis into an opportunity, we need to draw on lessons learned from the pandemic. The most important lessons could be related to how best to leverage online learning to improve pedagogical practices and better target lagging students. This is also critical time to join the global forces to address the many priorities in the education sector. Foundational learning for all is one. Digital learning to scale up learning and equity is another. School health, hygiene, nutrition, water, and sanitation to ensure safe and learner-friendly environment is the third. The list is long, and we cannot tackle this alone. This event is an important one for ADB's partnership, both for deepening the existing one as well as for exploring new ones. We look forward to exploring new opportunities to partners with the Qatar Fund for Development and other institutions to support our common development goals in Asia and the Pacific. Before I conclude, let me express our deep gratitude to the EAA Foundations for the excellent collaborations and organizations of today's event. Thank you, and I look forward to a vibrant and valuable discussion. Back to you, moderator.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bambang, for wonderful examples of how global institutions can work very well with foundations. And it's another wonderful instance, an example of the themes that we're exploring today, which is co-financing and partnership. And both of those examples, I think, really brought it to life. So our final keynote, we will be hearing from Mr. Ali Abdullah Al-Dabab, Deputy Director General for Planning of the Qatar Fund for Development.
Your Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Qatar Fund for Development, we would like to express our gratitude to all joining us today to witness this important virtual event. We are happy to be able to continue cementing our rewarding relationship with our strategic partner, Education Above All, and their continuous support to educated children around the world. Today, our children face continuous challenges that attacks them from every direction. Access to quality education has become a battle to those young souls, where without quality education, the difficulty to escape the poverty trap will increase. With all the past challenges that children were facing, COVID-19 has become greater struggle that reversed progress and created economic crisis around the globe. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know better than I, it is time to gather around and find smarter, innovative solutions to accelerate action towards vulnerable and marginalized groups. The urge to save economic crisis has arose in many areas around the world. It has now been widely acknowledged that investing in quality education isn't only the right thing to do so, but the way forward to sustainable development and economic growth. An estimated average on each additional year of education boosts a person's income by 10% and increase a country GDP by 18%. Access to quality education will contribute to eradicating poverty, increasing income, leading healthier lives, and contributes to building more peaceful societies. That said, investing in quality education is the most cost-effective way to drive economic development, improve skills, and offer wide opportunities for young women and men. Accelerate progress on the Sustainable Development Goals. More reasons to work closely with the strategic stakeholders like you to increase education funding and adopt innovative investing models to achieve SDG4. Qatar Fund for Development continues and will continue to collaborate closely with its strategic partners to support millions of children access quality education. We are proud to be at the forefront supporting Educate a Child. Recently, we have signed an agreement with Mali that aims to facilitate access to quality education for nearly 600,000 out-of-school children through loans. That holds new ways of sustainable, resilient, and quality education. However, with all that is said, we should continue to work together and must not forget that other millions are still waiting for our help. We trust that the innovative financing and the new financial strategies will offer new opportunities for children to access quality of education. We believe that with enhanced development technical solutions, more funding will be reached to larger groups of children who will contribute effectively to their communities. Let's all work hand in hand to achieve the best to all. We shall converge today's discussion and propose solutions to actions. We shall all unite and provide equal access opportunities to quality education for all children. Thank you.
A fantastic message there, and the numbers of children which have been reached is just extremely impressive and so needed if we're going to reach Sustainable Development Goal 4 by 2030 I think these efforts are going to be crucial. So to explore how crucial and how we do it, I'm really delighted to be joined by a terrific panel to discuss these issues and the way forward. So let me introduce my panelists. We are joined by Mr. Kevin Murphy, President of the Exxonmobil Foundation, Mr. Jamie Savedra, Global Director Education at the World Bank, Mr. Rakesh Bharti Mittal, Co-Chair of the BHarti Foundations Board, Ms. Mercedes Mateo Diaz, Chief of Education at the Inter-American Development Bank, and Ms. Yasmin Sharif, Director of Education Cannot Wait. What a terrific panel. My first question is going to go to Kevin. So Kevin, can you tell me about the importance of public and private sector financing, co-financing, and what it can achieve? So I'm thinking about school construction. So maybe you could tell me a bit about Angola and the 28,000 out-of-school children that have been helped by that project.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. And I'd like to thank the Education Above All Foundation for assembling the panel today. It's an honor to discuss ExxonMobil's experience working with the Educated Child program and the ways it successfully leverages those public-private partnerships to benefit at-risk children. When the UN Sustainable Development Goals were unveiled in 2015, it was clear that achieving them by 2030 would require unprecedented collaboration and cooperation. In the area of education, as we know, nearly 60 million primary school-age children currently lack access to education, and the vast majority are living in extreme poverty, often in areas of conflict. It's certainly an enormous challenge, but in 2012, Her Highness Sheikh Moza bin Nasser demonstrated incredible foresight and vision in founding education above all. She encouraged everyone to focus their attention on a serious problem, that is, children around the world with no access to education and therefore few prospects for better lives. In announcing the initial goal of reaching 10 million out-of-school children, she said she understood how ambitious that seemed. Ambitious, yes, but achievable with the correct approach and the right partners. The progress Educated Child has shown in now 50 different countries demonstrates that success is indeed possible. And at the ExxonMobil Foundation, we've been proud to support the success of this program in Angola and Nigeria. We're involved with a variety of education initiatives around the world. Math, science, technology, and engineering are the lifeblood of companies like ours. And we rely on skilled workforces in every country where we operate. So we have long invested in these programs, partners, and people to raise access to and the quality of education. Our most recent collaboration in Angola with Educated Child and the nonprofit Rise International offers a good example of how an innovative approach to public-private co-financing for school construction can pay real dividends, with results that exceeded initial targets. For example, over 25 schools were built with a total of 250 classrooms, and original plans were to enroll 24,000 out-of-school Angolan children. But as of the most recent reporting period, 29,000 were enrolled. These are heartening numbers. Behind data, of course, are real people, in this case, nearly 30,000 children gaining access to education for the first time. The difference this can make in their lives and in their families' lives is profound. And the program offers broader benefits to local communities in terms of construction jobs and employment for teachers and school administrators. That economic stimulus provides a welcome complement to the longer-term advantages that will accrue to the students themselves. Making these achievements even more impressive is that progress continued despite the challenges presented by COVID. All project schools were completed by the middle of last year, and when schools did reopen in February, they were fully ready for the students. A few years ago, Dr. Mary Jo Bagazi and I had the pleasure of visiting a few schools that were constructed in rural Angola and to celebrate with dozens of students and teachers there. It was an experience I'll never forget, seeing the pure joy of new students and their teachers dancing and singing outside, completely undeterred by a torrential downpour. Nothing could dampen their enthusiasm for the opportunity to get an education and to improve their lives. This is the type of work that we can be proud of. And it's made possible when stakeholders from all sectors, government agencies, nonprofits, and corporations work together. So thank you for including me in the discussion today, and thanks to everyone participating today. You're each making a unique and significant contribution to the success of the Education Above All Foundation and its mission to get more kids a quality education. Thank you.
How wonderful, Kevin. I now have this image of school children dancing in the rain, that they're so delighted to be at school. You've left us with wonderful imagery, and how brilliant is it that you've actually reached more children than what you had targeted. So terrific example of public and private co-financing. Later on in the discussion, I may come back to you to talk about what else the private sector could be doing. But first, let me go now to Jamie. And I want to continue on this theme about results-based financing. So, Jamie, can you tell me about the importance of harmonized results-based financing, such as the new joint World Bank GPE and Education Above All EAC project, say in Djibouti? You're on mute, which is the phrase of 2021.
2021. Thank you very much, Dr. Yue. So look, I'm delighted to be part of this distinguished panel, and thanks to EAA for organizing a space to discuss the immense challenges that we're facing today. We're living the worst crisis in a century. This is like a bombshell that has left physical capital untouched, but has devastated human capital. Tragic health impacts that are evident, but gigantic impacts on the education and human capital accumulation of children and youth. And as it was mentioned a few minutes ago, a year of education can generate 10% more of income along life. Well, that same 10% has been lost. Hundreds of millions of children have lost a year or more of effective education. And if we do not accelerate, those effects might be permanent. This generation can be losing up to $16 trillion of future earnings. And I'm not talking about the economic cost for the whole society. I'm talking about the cost for this generation only. So actually, action is absolutely critical. And that's where this focus on results that you were asking, Linda, are critical. They are at the heart of improving education outcomes. And focusing in making sure that kids are in school and learning, measuring if results are happening and adjusting policies as needed, always with a focus on the result, on the focus on the outcome. That sounds like an obvious thing to do, but unfortunately, that's not the case. Computers might be bought, salaries might be paid, money might be spent, and sometimes we see schools operating, but schooling does not always mean learning if we do not focus on the results. And moreover, there are still many children for which schooling is not yet a reality. So we have worked together, and let me give you a couple of examples, working together with different partners to exemplify how can we really focusing on results, try to make a difference in the short run. One thing that I wanted to mention is the Accelerator program, which is a program launched in 2020, or in late 2020, with in partnership with UNICEF, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, FCDO, UNESCO, and USAID. And the program aims to demonstrate that governments that are dedicated to improving their foundational learning outcomes can achieve results in a few years. Change is possible in the short run. But for that, to move the needle of learning in the short run, we identify 5 things. And there is a group of countries in which we see that those 5 things: assure political and technical commitment to making children literate. Second, ensure adequate amounts of effective instruction by supported teachers in the classroom. Third, make sure that we provide quality age-appropriate books and texts to all children in a country. Fourth, teach children in the language that they speak and understand best. And 5, engage parents and communities to foster children's language abilities and love for books and love for learning. At this stage, we have 10 countries working in this accelerator program, including Kenya, Pakistan, Rwanda, Sierra Leone, the head state of Nigeria, the head state of Brazil. all agents, multilaterals, donors, NGOs can align behind a government with a plan like this and support towards the same objective, have a coherent plan and measure learning, define targets, and make sure that learning is happening. The second example that I wanted to mention is our partnership with EIA and GPE in Djibouti. In this partnership, we're funding the enrollment of up to 35,000 primary school level out of school children. This partnership is clear and focused on a specific and critical goal: 35,000 primary school children who are not in school, and we need to make sure that they are in school and they learn. We're working together and co-funding this intervention, and the disbursements are precisely linked to results in terms of getting back to school. It is about resources. It is about putting more money into the education. We at the World Bank, just the last 2 years, has been more than $11 billion that has been destined in grants and loans to education programs. But it's not only resources, it is a source of urgency. We have today, and with this I closed, a larger urgent task. So many countries are still without classes. Only a few have been able to access remote learning that assure a meaningful education experience. And we need to make sure that all kids go back to school. Before the pandemic, we had still a large number of children that were out of school. That number, as of today, might be increasing by 10 million children. And we need to make sure that, that this challenge of out-of-school children is not multiplied, is not expanded, and the actions that are needed are absolutely urgent. A famous African proverb that we all know: if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. It is true. In this case, we need to go far and we need to go fast. And we really need to continue working together. The partnerships that we have had with the EIA, the partnership the World Bank has with UNHCR, with GPE, with UNICEF and UNESCO are an excellent example. But anything that we're doing today is not enough. It is urgent and we need to move fast if we want to make sure that this generation does not have a permanent negative impact in their productivity, in their earnings, and in their welfare. So let's continue working together and trying to make sure that this generation does not lose and that all children have the opportunity of a good education and a good life. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jaime. That was very inspiring. I think just hearing about such clear targets and the focus on results, I think it is indeed that kind of tailoring that's going to help get the children impacted from COVID, prevent them from becoming, as you say, a lost generation, experience scarring in lifetime earnings, because that is what can happen when you have such a shock to the economy. So how wonderful to hear about programs which are so targeted and therefore successful and effective. So thank you very much for sharing that. As we kind of go around the panel, I may well come back to you and to say a bit more about those 5 different areas. But I want to now turn to Rakesh. So Rakesh, please could you tell us about how the Bharti Foundation's education initiatives are impacting the most disadvantaged children in India?
Thank you, Dr. Linda, and happy to join my friends and hope all of you are keeping well, you and your loved ones. Clearly, I think we are at a stage where pandemic not only derailed large initiatives and economic growth across the world, but it also impacted and almost brought a catastrophic education emergency, where we saw the children not going to school or partially going to school, missing out on their learning levels. And as schools are now opening up, we are clearly seeing, especially in the Bharti schools which Bharti Foundation runs, we probably will need to run some remedial classes for all the children, because you can understand a 15, 18-month hiatus of not coming to schools does put a lot of pressure, including the teachers preparing for their courses, teaching. This has also resulted in the percentage of children of out-of-school children going up in India. And it could be in the range of about 4 to 5% higher than what it was a year and a half, 2 years ago. Let me tell you about Bharti Foundation. We are focusing on education opportunities, helping the underprivileged children, more importantly in the rural areas, in the rural India, and are currently reaching out to students, about 286,000 children across 16 states and union territories, with 11,000 teachers. But with two big focus which we have. One is the education in our schools, which is the Sept schools, is free education, providing uniform, books, midday meal, so that a child also get a nutritious meal. And I think that is something important for a healthy mind and a healthy body to be educated. And the second is a focus on the girl child. And I'm very happy to share that out of the 40,000 students in our schools, 183 schools, 50% of them are girls. And the teachers are 73% female teachers, where we are providing employment in the rural areas. The second big program we started was with the government, state governments, a quality support program where we are running 791 schools. Actually not running, it's a quality support program. They run the school and education, but we through volunteers provide everything around education so that the children come to school regularly, and the attendance has gone up, the teachers are available, computer labs have come up, libraries have come up. So the learning level has moved up significantly. But one of the things which I saw in the last 15, 18 months was the teachers, how they really upskilled themselves and up the ante, if I may say, of getting on to video lectures which were delivered online on WhatsApp groups, through television educational programs, through different apps. And while all this was happening, the Satya Bharti school learnings, we took into 790 government schools across 13 states, which really also helped us to fast track that program. And let me quickly talk about the out-of-school children, in partnership with the Education Above All Foundation. This we started in 2013, when the Millennium Development Goals were set, and Bharti Foundation with EAA has put in about $17 million, and 385,000 children have been brought into school who were out of school. The good thing which we also saw was that when we went and talked to the parents, they were receptive, they were ready to listen. And we also got tremendous support from the government schools where Satya Bharti learning centers came up, so that we brought all the children age appropriation into one classroom and prepared them for their relevant classes in the next 6 to 9 months. In phase one, which ran in the Satya Bharti schools, that was the 100 and, we were at about 200 plus schools at that point of time. 60,000 children were brought into school who were out of school. Those learnings went into a second phase where we partnered. And I think that was a very good training ground and learning ground for my team, which then we put strong processes around and partnered with Educate Girls Globally and Humana People to People India. In the next phase, we have already brought 325,000 children back to school who were out of school. So overall, the impact has been 385. And I believe while this program is still continuing, the importance of global partnerships and multilateral collaborations is immense, more so in the post-pandemic world. And I'm very happy to see my fellow panelists who are also talking about partnering, because we not only share our pool in our resources, but I think the best practices, there is a lot of learning, and we together can work and reach economies of scale to ensure that every child, the last standing child, whose parents cannot afford to send those kids to school, get educated and contribute to the economy in the country where they live and become true global citizens. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think, we often talk about the economic importance of education, but it's wonderful to hear you stress it is indeed about citizenship. It is about being full members of society. So how wonderful to hear about your partnership with the EAA. And I couldn't agree more. You have to have good food, good health, and a chance to go to school. So it's absolutely terrific to hear what you are partnering to provide to children. Thank you very much. Now I want to turn to Mercedes and change tacks a little bit. So Mercedes, it'd be brilliant to hear from you about how the Inter-American Development Bank is using innovative partnership financing models, for instance, in Haiti.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Thank you, Linda. It's a great pleasure to be here. Good morning, everybody. And a special hello to my fellow panelists and partners and to Education Above All for convening us today. Yes, so I in a context in which, and thank you for asking the question about Haiti in particular, in a context in which the needs exceed the capacity of any single actor, working together, strengthening the ecosystems and finding alternative ways of financing is key. The word of the day in that context is blended, given also the crisis and the situation and the kind of what Jaime was mentioning about potential risk of a lost generation. And so in that context, it makes more sense to join forces to finance together solutions to a development challenge than to invest individually. And I truly believe that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So along that spirit, we have created a large coalition with the private sector to identify opportunities for collaboration on the ground where the people who work to solve these challenges are, for example. I could share several examples of the type of work and collaboration that the IDB is doing, but today I would like to highlight what we have been doing with Education Above All in Haiti. As you all know, Haiti is a country that has been particularly hard hit, not only by the pandemic, but by natural disasters, too devastating earthquakes, political instability, etc. The measures that needed to be taken in Haiti as a response to the COVID-19 pandemic were sent an already precarious education situation, which resulted in approximately 50% of children not coming back to school for the 2020-2021 school year. So one of the main reasons for this has been the economic impact the pandemic had on families. Education costs represent on average almost 52% of household income, and 80% of families are finding hard to send their children to school even as restrictions are being lifted. So those families saw their grounds shaken with an additional crisis. The recent earthquake is estimated to further impair access to education to 540,000 children. And that was clearly a call for action, and what inspired and moved and the IDB and Education Above All to join forces to bring back the implementation of tuition waivers, which had shown successful results in 2017 for education in order to ease the economic burden of families. So I think, and I want to highlight this, in the case of Haiti, but in many other countries, as my fellow panelists have shared, it's very relevant that actors such as us and foundations such as Education Above All join forces towards common objectives. And in that particular case that I just mentioned, I believe it's a case of at least five things that add value to the partnership and add value to the beneficiaries. It's about alignment, it's about scale, it's about efficiency, it's about the response capacity, and it's about effectiveness. And why is that? Because the project is aligned with the Ministry of Education plan. By joining forces, we are not overstretching an already demanding counterpart. and taxing on their limited institutional capacity with disconnected projects and different procedures and administrative demands. So joining forces in cases like this improves alignment and generates efficiency. But it's also a question of a scale, our response capacity and the results. And as I said before, here the whole is more than the sum of the parts. The IDB's recently approved project in that particular case that originally aimed to benefit more than 60,000 primary school students, and that was allowing them to continue with their studies in non-public schools. It was already in place, was already approved, but thanks to our co-financing mechanism with Education Above All, we will now be able to expand to 12,000 additional beneficiaries, targeting the 3 most affected departments by the 2021 earthquake that had not been originally contemplated in our project. So, and also to mention that in addition to all those benefits of joining forces, Education Above All co-financing will also contribute to implement a climate resilient program in select beneficiary schools, and it will contribute overall to the Sustainable Development Goals, goal number 4, by ensuring access to quality education for the most vulnerable.
Thank you so much, Mercedes. And again, terrific to hear about the different ways in which innovative financing scale, increasing access. You know, I think we should all take heart that with this kind of collaboration, SDG4 could be within reach. And in fact, I want to come back to the panel on as a final thought. But first, I want to hear from Yasmin. But I do want to come back to the panel and just have a kind of final message before we wrap up the panel around the single thing you would most like to see going forward so that we can overcome the issues raised by COVID and achieve SDG4. But before that, I want to hear from you, Yasmin. You're the Director of Education Cannot Wait. I do like, it's just so clear. It's just absolutely so clear. And on that, we have heard about COVID-19 and how that's worsened the educational prospects. It's heightened the vulnerabilities of the already marginalized out-of-school children. It would just be very good to hear your take on the impact of COVID-19 and perhaps what we should be looking ahead to.
Thank you very much, Linda, and Assalamu alaikum, and hello to everyone, and thank you very much for inviting Education Cannot Wait to this very prominent event, learning more about education above all. I actually attend annually, and I'm just equally impressed every time to learn about the results and the great work that Education Above All is doing, and the tremendous role that Qatar plays, and with the leadership of Sheikh Musa here. Now, for Education Cannot Wait as a global fund for education emergencies, before COVID-19, there was an estimated 75 million children. And as a result of COVID-19, adding to their already existing challenges of climate change, of conflict, brutal conflicts, and the refugees and in turn displaced, it's very clear we cannot do this alone. We have to work in partnership. And here I really want to start off by giving a lot of credit to Education Above All, because you were the pioneer and also a source of inspiration to Education Cannot Wait to systematize the measuring of impact and the evidence-based data and material. So I think you played an instrumental role in this. And when I look at the potentials for our partnership with you, together with everyone else who is here talking today, I think many of us, we work mostly in the same countries. Education Cannot Wait has made investments in 38 crisis or refugee hosting countries. And we all believe in the multi-year approach. Education is the development sector, but we need to manage that in a humanitarian crisis context. And we need to reach those left furthest behind from Sustainable Development Goal 4. We need to focus on those who are in the darkest corners of the world, because they are the furthest left behind with the kind of limited resources that we have today. So I would really also like to give a lot of credit to the partners such as UNHCR, who has spoken today already, my dear friend Kelly Clemens, and my friend in the World Bank, and UNICEF and UNESCO and WFP, and many civil society organizations that are doing tremendous work on the front lines. Private sector that is really rising to the occasion, and of course all the great governments that are out there with whom we are partnering. So we look forward to partnering and working closely with Education Above All, because we have a similar approach and we have also the same desire for a partnership. And again, in doing so, to conclude, I really want to celebrate and honor the work of Educated Child, which is a flagship to complement, where ECW can work in complementarity to broaden our outreach, giving the growing number of children as a result of COVID-19. I also would like to take this opportunity to welcome Qatar as a member of Education Cannot Wait's high-level steering group, because we need to inspire political support, and that's what we are doing there, which will translate into financing for education for those left furthest behind. And let me conclude, because I've seen Qatar and the work of Sheikh Musa in action, and it goes back many years when I was based in Jerusalem, and I saw the great work coming out of the Al-Fahura program. I think it was absolutely genius under the leadership of Sheikh Musa and Fahed al-Sulaiti and Qatar in Gaza, where it started with scholarships, it expanded into schools, it expanded into UNRWA, and at the end, it was supporting all education in Gaza. And they are really amongst those left furthest behind, and brought in UNDP, UNICEF, and so many others into a great partnership. So I look forward for Education Cannot Wait to join forces with you, and thank you for having us here. We are all in this together. Thank you. Shukran kathir.
Thank you very much, Yasmin. How wonderful to hear. Again, initiatives, partnerships, and progress. No one's going to get to go because the panel are going to be brought back, and I very much would like to get final thoughts from each of the panelists. We have explored innovative co-financing. We have explored, I think, very impressively, partnerships, because I think it was always clear that there is no chance that the SDG goals could ever be achieved without public-private partnerships. And I think you've demonstrated with that simple phrase, how complicated it actually is, and what it takes to actually reach such hard to reach children in marginalized areas and give them a quality education. So it's been hugely inspiring. But as we know, COVID, as we've heard, has set back progress against the SDGs. So my final question, and I'll go around to each of you in turn, is what is the one thing you would like to see all of us think about, do, or perhaps what you're going to do next to ensure that COVID does not leave marginalized children out of quality education, and that we can achieve SDG4. So Kevin, sorry, you're going to be on the spot first. And if you could say a word as well about what else the private sector could do besides financing, that'd also be welcome.
I appreciate that, Linda. I think, well, two things I'll maybe lead with. One is, we talked about the collaboration that's needed, particularly during these times of COVID. And the private sector, I think, in addition to being a source of financing, certainly can bring some other assets to bear to these partnerships. One is, trying to foster economic development and social development in these communities. Another, not such a small thing, is jobs, opportunities for employment. And one of the things I think that we frequently are drawn upon to provide are business management and organizational skills. So, whether they be in engineering, law, or procurement, or communications. We have experts in all of those fields, and certainly enjoy bringing those assets to the table. And for a company like ours that can provide at times affordable energy, which is certainly key to economic growth. And that, with COVID and weather emergencies and with certainly in areas of conflict, I think the thing that we've learned is just critical to have reliable, committed partners through that process, and that certainly has worked well for us. We've had a wonderful partnership with Educated Child and with Rise International and with other partners in trying to achieve all these goals.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Same question to you, Jaime. Any final thoughts on next steps to ensure we do achieve SDG4?
Thanks, Linda. So my first thought is that, what we're talking about, working together and jointly behind many governments that are trying to do their best, I think is critical. Coordination and working together sometimes is not easy. We need to be realistic. But I think we have many examples of impactful partnerships just in this table. Our work jointly with Education Cannot Wait under the leadership of Yasmin, our partnership here with Education Above All, the mission recovery that we had created with UNESCO and UNICEF in order to foster moving faster on going back to school. I think they're very good examples, right? We are the largest grant agent for the Global Partnership for Education, for GPE. But I think that is so great, but that's not enough. What we need, and I want to emphasize something a phrase that I mentioned, is sense of urgency, right? Sometimes we think that changes in education or education reforms take time. Might be true. Systematic reforms might take time, right? Moving from a good system, from a fair system to a good system takes time. But children are today needing an education stimulation. So we need to make sure that there is a change in the education experience of children today. And as Dr. Bharti mentioned, we really need to invest today on remedial and accelerated education. But it's something that is really urgent. We're not talking about next year. We're talking literally about today, right? And how much efforts we're making together with countries so that we make sure that kids go back to school as fast as possible, obviously taking into account all the health and sanitary considerations, but that they are back to school. But they are not back to school just where they were at the end of 2019. They need to go back to school, and we need to have the right programs and the right adjustments in the whole education system, such that we are able to recover part of the time lost. If that doesn't happen, there will be a permanent negative premium, say, right, on this generation forever. But the time to act on that is now. So that sense of urgency is absolutely critical in everything that we do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Great message there as well. Rakesh, same question to you. Final thoughts on this topic.
Well, Linda, I can just say that India has its own dynamics, and being a very diverse and vast country with a huge population, the problems and challenges are immense. From my perspective, we will continue to focus on the girl child, because I think that is extremely important. I firmly believe if you provide education to a girl, the next few generations will be educated, which unfortunately doesn't hold good for the boys. I'm sure the two my fellow panelists would agree on that. But having said that, we also need to scale up our initiatives. And that scaling up can happen through intervention of technology. Pandemic has brought in, I think, a very good opportunity of putting this education online. And I'm not saying 100% online, because it has to be a hybrid solution, especially those kids who can't come to schools or who can't take out time. I'm again saying country like India because they become earning hands. They can complete their education online. And therefore, technological interventions by way of smart classes, by way of using different apps which are available on the net, which can be delivered. And coming from a technology company, Airtel, including, I would say, the same hold good for the 14 African countries where we provide telecom networks under Airtel. This is something which will have to be done. So that is the 2 points. And I'll just conclude with a suggestion, because Education Above All Foundation has many partners who have worked with them. And I'm sure Education Cannot Wait and my other fellow panelists, can a sharing of best practices happen? What did EAA find good amongst the partners? If that sharing can go around, I am sure we will be a different world. Everyone can pick up the right things, do the right things, rather than have a long learning curve at every foundation. So that is just a suggestion. I'm parking that, and I'm sure you can appropriately forward that to the relevant people. And I must also say that my first meeting with Sheikh Hamoza, I must compliment her for the passion she had of bringing 10 million children out of school children back to school. But the entire focus on education, which she led from the front, further energized even people like us at BHarti Foundation to go beyond just running the schools, but getting into how we can look at getting the out of school children into school, back into schools. And then they are today pushing the other children to come to school. So they are our brand ambassadors, as a matter of fact.
Oh, that's absolutely wonderful comments, and I think that's a great point about learning from best practice. That's one of the wonderful things about having partners, is learning from each other and then delivering even more. Thank you so much, Rakesh. Mercedes, same question to you. Final thoughts on this topic.
Thank you, Linda. I think we first need to make sure that whatever is done to recover from the pandemic, which is the urgent thing to be done, sets the ground for a better education that truly levels the playing field for everybody, but in particular for the generation COVID. What we had before the pandemic wasn't enough. And in particular, I'm talking from a region that is one of the most unequal regions of the world. So that is I think is key. The second message is, and I want to go back to the financing dimension. Financing is also key. If you ask me whether we can do more with the resources we have, the answer is yes, we can be more efficient in the use of resources. We can be more efficient in our spending. However, if the question is, can we do everything we need with the current level of spending or investments, the answer is no. If we want to move the education from 1.0 to 2.0 to 3.0 to 4.0, which is the education that actually will prepare and equip students for today's and tomorrow's challenges, we need to invest more. And my third message or final reflection has to do with the education that we want and the school we want for our children and youth. And there, I think we need, one, to make sure that students remain in school. That should be one objective, one priority objective. Second, making sure that they learn what they have to, not just the basics, but also those additional skills, 21st century skills that they need today. Third, that we make the best use of technology. And for that, we support a digital transformation, the digital transformation of our education systems. And fourth, and particularly important, we need to make sure that schools are a safe space and a motivating environment for our students. We've seen during the pandemic lose motivation. We've seen during the pandemic students affected, the mental health of students affected by the situation and by the restrictions. And we all know that physical, mental, and social-emotional health are important for every child, but particularly critical for those students that have difficult conditions at home.
Great messages, and particularly the fact that the financing is not enough to get us to where we need to be. So I think that's a great call to action. Amongst both you and Rakesh mentioned technology. I think we've all learned to Zoom. And I think, deploying technology could perhaps help in terms of reaching even more children, but it's not the whole solution. It's a wonderful comment. And a final word to you, Yasmin. You've heard from, I think, all of them, the urgency of the issue. So it's perfect that you're the final voice on this panel.
Thank you so much. No, I think we all agree. I mean, we all think alike and we just express it differently or manage different corners of it. But I do want to stress, my colleague Jamie Saavedra and Mercedes also mentioned it, and all of you, Kevin and Rakesh and so forth, is the urgency. The urgency. We are the development agenda is closing in. We are speaking about a couple of more 8 more years to go, and I just have to quote "The Fierce Urgency of Now" by Martin Luther King. I realized as I was sitting here, because I think there are so many great people in this meeting, and I really forgot to give huge credit to Mary Jo Picozzi, who is actually the brain behind Educate a Child, which is the brainchild of Education Above All. So credit to you for that as well. Now, I would pick up on what has been said and conclude that since we are a global fund, I do believe that the top priority is financing. And I'll tell you why. When we look at the OECD numbers for the cost of education for a child in Europe, let's say, it's about $10,000 a year. And we want, as Mercedes said, we want quality. And I know that the World Bank is very strong on that. We all are. We want quality education, not just a pen and a paper. We want them to have learning outcomes. And we want technology. And we want, there's so much we want. Now, the budgets we have to operate with for a child in the Sahel, in Mali, in South Sudan, the Rohingyas, $120 to $240 a year. Compare that to $10,000 for a child in Sweden, Norway, or Holland. And not say that financing is not the top priority. Financing is the top priority. Now, how do we make financing be seen as the top priority? By exercising a greater understanding of equity. What the pandemic has shown us is the severe divide between North and South, between those who have and those who don't. That's what the pandemic showed us. Now you have to increase the financing so that those children can have the same education or a similar education as those who have and were educated for thousands of dollars a year. So I would conclude with that. Financing, equity, and humanity belongs together. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What a terrific message from this panel. We are rapidly running out of time, but it's now time for closing remarks, which will be given by Mr. Hassan Al-Mulla, Chief Executive Officer of Silotech.
Thank you. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, while listening to all the remarkable speakers we have had today, I've heard many important messages from each and every one of them. However, I realized the common theme that emerged highlighting the purpose of this event, which was repeated over and over again. Alignment, harmonizing, integration, cross-global partnerships, blended financing, and joint interventions. These words and many more, they all go back to one unified message, which is the importance of making connections. Now, let me take you a step back in history and talk about our name, Silotech. Silotech comes from the Arabic word salah, which means connection or linking, and is the inspiration behind our foundation. Silotech was founded by Her Highness Sheikh Hamouza bint Nasser as an international socio-economic development nonprofit NGO to connect young people to economic opportunities, decent jobs, and develop innovative enterprises and employment initiatives. SOLA serves as the foundation of creating strategic interventions and innovative alliances. It also bridges the gap and strengthens the alignment between quality education, vocational training, and job placement to advance socio-economic development across marginalized communities. To put things into perspective, I would like to elaborate on the global issue of youth unemployment. Youth unemployment is a global challenge that, if not addressed immediately, could turn into a global crisis. The population of young men and women is growing at a much faster rate, outpacing the number of jobs that are available for them in the marketplace. Over and above that comes the COVID-19 pandemic, which forced hundreds of millions of people globally to lose their jobs, with youth taking the hardest hit, as more than 1 in 6 youth are out of work due to COVID-19 in 2020, in accordance to the ILO. Without meaningful work, young men and women have no hope for the future, leaving them more vulnerable to radicalization, violence, and extremism. Addressing unemployment requires a unified effort at the local and the global level, and is more impactful when the effort combines the involvement of both the private and the public sector. There is no doubt that each organization or agency has the capabilities to deliver tangible results by their own means. However, every organization aspires to exponentially magnify their initiatives and drive generational impact. Solotech favors a comprehensive approach targeted toward the creation of ecosystems that are conducive to youth empowerment and enterprise development. We strategically bring together a diverse pool of partners that include MFIs, international NGOs, UN agencies, and local community organizations. This approach highlights the significance of SILA for the creation of a holistic intervention and innovative alliances through collaboration and partnership. The SILA approach is the vehicle to unveil resources, including innovative financing, sharing expertise and responsibilities, and enables the achievement of economies of scale. All of that is to amplify total reach of people in dire need of our support, whether in health, education, or employment. SILA also embraces the UN Sustainable Development Goals, including SDG17, calling for fostering global partnerships, which encourages us to continue to challenge ourselves as well as others to develop collaborative end-to-end solutions that stretches the value chain. To complement other initiatives, including education, by offering educated youth the opportunity to earn a decent living, or giving the parents of out-of-school children decent employment, making them able to afford quality education for their children. The journey towards achieving the sustainable transformation of marginalized young people is still in its beginning. By continuing to invest in youth today, through quality education and decent employment, we ensure future generations have the opportunity to live with the dignity they deserve. It has never been more important than now to work with existing and new strategic partners as we turn the page on this devastating pandemic, utilizing the most powerful asset in society, that is, its youth, to come back from the global crisis stronger than ever. SILA is our target, our message, and our purpose. Therefore, I invite you all to connect, to change the trajectory of youth empowerment, and advance the impact of your strategic investment models. Thank you.
What a perfect and empowering message. Thank you very much to Mr. Hassan Amula for really, I think, capturing so well some key issues that we discussed and giving us an inspiring message to take forward. So thank you very much. And I today learned about the term SILA. So, and I'm sure all of us watching will keep remembering that message and that word. So thank you. So we are almost out of time, but we will now hear finally from Dr. Mary Joy Bagosi, Executive Director of Educate a Child, which we have heard so much about this program today already, of the Education Above All Foundation. She will conclude with a call to action.
Thank you, Dr. Yu. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Mr. Amula, for talking about the importance of connecting. Your point reminds me of the connections that all of us here and many others have made to improve children's lives. When EAC opened its doors at the end of 2012, we had a clear vision of what we wanted. We had some initial strategies, but we knew we had to build out those strategies in significant ways if we were to be able to come close to the vision of enabling millions of out-of-school children to get quality primary education. We knew that if we kept funding education using the same old singular, uncoordinated, and sometimes duplicative approaches, there was little chance of a bright future for those who were not already in school. Our first idea was to pay 50% of any project so that partners had some skin in the game. Much to our surprise, this skin has turned into significant, harmonized scope and scale, working for over 10 million children. But the many barriers to children's education are still there. We all know that a single-faceted strategy was not enough. So we reached out to ODAs, the private sector, foundations, and multilateral banks, among others, looking for ways to bring more money to support the lofty goal of universal primary education, where not a single child is left behind. Our invitation has taken many forms. For example, this is the third UNGA session on innovative financing that we have supported. Today, those of you here have demonstrated that if we are willing and ready to go that extra mile, we can find ways to bring together different mandates, different modalities, and serve a common goal, the fundamental right to education for all children, especially the marginalized, the vulnerable, the forgotten, and making sure that every child counts. There are also shared goals that go beyond the fundamental rights of children, goals that serve all of humanity. We also know the price paid by our societies in other sectors when we do not educate our children: the economic, health, judicial, peace, and security costs. The high expense of not educating children is far greater than the cost of providing it to them. Through our creativity and commitment, directing international and domestic financing towards educating the most disadvantaged will pay off for families, their communities, and their countries. Together, we've done so much, leveraging millions and millions of dollars for millions and millions of children. We've done that based on the good practice that together we have learned and applied in different contexts. But there's more to do. Thank you, each and every one of you, for your steadfast commitment as together and with more like-minded partners and organizations, we make this urgent call to action to find more partners and more creative ways to invest more in achieving universal primary education. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mary Joy Pagosian, for the perfect call to action to conclude this absolutely stimulating seminar. We have just about a minute left, and it's been such a rich discussion. I'm not even going to attempt to summarize it, but I do want to stress two takeaways. One is around financing, and the other one is around partnerships. Throughout this webinar, we have heard about the range of approaches that EAA and the EAC and its partners have employed to promote creative, innovative financing mechanisms. That is going to be key to achieving SDG 4.1 and helping out-of-school children. And then the second takeaway is around partnerships. We've also heard about public-private institutions, private foundations, and partnering, working with teachers and schools. So I'd stress that continuing to develop existing and new partnerships and learning from each other that can utilize these financing models, which promote aligned, harmonized, and results-oriented education investments. That is the second takeaway, which is absolutely key. So both of those things, innovative financing, co-financing, and partnerships, that's how we get to SDG 4.1 achieved by 2030. Today's session has shown that it's possible, and it's impossible to overstate how important this goal is. Any opportunity I have, I'd like to quote Nelson Mandela, who said, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. And I think we've made a start here today. So thank you all for taking the time to join us. Thank you all for your support, and a warm round of thanks to what a terrific lineup of speakers and all the incredible work that you're doing. Thank you to everyone and to the team at EAA who put this together. And I hope you're as inspired as I am, and do everyone enjoy a wonderful day.